Welcome to the Law Shit You Should Know podcast. We're here to talk a little bit about the law
and a whole lot about nothing. Every week, we have a new guest to discuss current events, legal drama, and dive even deeper into
the Law Shit You Should Know.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Law Shit You Should Know with Elina Santana.
and Leslie Marenko.
And today we have the amazing Jonathan Goldstein. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
So tell everybody watching who you are, what you do, why you're here with us today.
Okay, so I'm Jonathan Goldstein. I'm a partner with Haber Law, PA, and I'm board certified in condominium and plan development law. I co-chair our firm's community association practice group. And essentially, I like to say that I represent condominium associations, homeowners associations, and the unit owners who love them.
Oh, you'll do both sides?
The unit owners.
You'll represent like a unit owner also?
Sometimes. We're
as long as you're not conflicted out?
Yeah, as long as we're not conflicted out and there's a little bit of a presumption against it that can be overcome.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I like the unit owners that love them.
That love them.
Because they do, right? They love their...
Love and hate. The thin line between love and hate.
So I've never lived in a place. I've never bought a place that had a condo, and
lucky you.
Yeah, apparently from what I'm hearing. And so, how do people get on these boards? How do you choose? Elina, you were on a board. How did you decide that this was going to be a good use of your time, Elina?
True story. So I was president of my homeowners association for quite a while. For about almost 4 years, I think, or just over 4 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know, way too long. But no, my story was a little unique. I did not run for my board.
Oh, people usually run for this?
Yes, there's an election. It's like
no.
Yeah, it's an election. It's everybody wants to be on these crazy ass boards. I did not run. When I was a brand new owner, I had been very frustrated by my buying experience because the association at the time wasn't being responsive to the documents we needed to close. And so when I did close and finally became a homeowner, I actually went to the first board meeting that happened to bitch and moan.
To tell them what a terrible job they were doing?
Correct, because I was really upset. And I was like, you're preventing people from being able to buy, sell, and like, it's part of like the betterment of the community. You can't like make it difficult to buy. Like, this is good for us, right? So anyways, I went to bitch and moan basically at the first meeting, where I was promptly told that our board of 3 only had a board of 2 and asked if I wanted to volunteer for the third.
Since you're bitching, please come join us.
If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself.
Change, right?
Yeah, the change you want to see.
You want to see in the world.
Oh.
And so I volunteered.
And she said, sure.
I wanted good things for my brand new property.
Most rational people would be like, no, thank you.
But
I gotta go.
Actually,
I'm running a law firm,
it's worth emphasizing in terms of like loving condos. Like, it takes a certain kind of passion and involvement to be a volunteer director.
I know.
It's not paid.
No.
In 99% of the cases, There's rare cases it could be, but theoretically, but it's not paid. You're spending a ton of time under tremendous scrutiny, dealing with all kinds of drama.
It's a labor of love.
Yeah.
It's a labor of love. No, but I honestly, I've dealt with HOAs my whole life. Our original community where I not grew up, but like joined when I was like a teenager. My parents it wasn't a condo, but it was an HOA, similar concept, a closed gated community that they dealt with all the public space. And I absolutely see the value in them because I am not the type of person who wants to deal with mowing grass. Like, I just don't give a fuck.
Sure.
I'm a city dweller. I love the idea of a condo. I love someone else handling the pool maintenance. I really love this concept. And for me, where we were in this board that I was a part of was like a townhouse community. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. I didn't have to deal with high rise and some of the things that go along with that, but I also didn't have to mow my own grass, which was kind of nice.
Sure.
And there's usually a pool sometimes.
Yeah, and 2 pools. My community had 2 pools and a tennis court, actually, and like a racquetball court. Anyways, so I said, sure, I'll volunteer for this third empty seat. And so I was appointed to the third seat. And then just 2 or 3 months later, the other 2 board members quit and I became president.
I was going to say, it didn't dawn on her that there's a reason why this seat is empty.
We got you. We're out of here.
It just occur to her, like, why is there nobody else on this board?
And then he quit and I became
the only person.
Yeah, and so I had to start recruiting other people to be on the board. And eventually I did recruit 2 others with me. And then nobody ran for years because every year we'd have an election and no one would run. And so we'd continue to be in charge. And for 4 years, I was president of my homeowners association, never having run for this position in my life.
And actually, nowadays, the law has changed so that new directors within 90 days have to take like a certification course,
to take it.
or they have to read the entire book of
No.
governing documents,
I did. I
and they sign a form that's they swear
Olga.
they swear they've read the governing documents and will uphold them, and they have to.
Liability that attaches to this role, Jonathan. Tell me
Well,
how crazy this is.
Actually, there's like a whole business judgment rule, and directors have a very high threshold before they can be sued personally.
God.
So, like, if you're a director, you generally can't be sued unless your actions are like willful or reckless
Okay.
or
Yeah.
criminal or self-dealing, where you get like an improper personal benefit.
Sure.
But like,
facts.
yeah, the key thing is like this
Sure.
reckless standard,
Yeah.
because recklessness, what does that mean? It's more than just negligence. There's like a statutory standard of care, like listen to professionals, listen to reliable sources of information, do things in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
Do that, you're more likely to be found you're not reckless. If you ignore it, fly in the face of it, and you're just kind of like, who cares? That may be reckless. And I think that reckless standard, maybe it shifts a little bit after Champlain Tower South and that tragedy, perhaps. So how that standard is judged
Talk about that soon.
could be changing.
Yeah.
But people go to these courses and and they love it. Like, we give this huge course, covers all this information, and everybody wants to ask questions. Can't get enough. People sit for an hour and a half. They're like ready to stay. Like,
Yeah.
Fascinating.
it's not.
Yeah.
People don't suffer through that. They are really
They're
interested.
gung ho.
They're
They're
really
like,
interested.
I am ready to get a new landscape.
They want to learn.
This guy's not good
This
enough.
may not be interesting to you, but when we talk about the maintenance and what's going on, the place you live, I mean, for God's sakes, this is intricately tied to your being and your happiness, right? Is your home and the community. I absolutely. So you say I'm crazy, but like, for sure I would have volunteered. I would have volunteered even if it wasn't an empty board, because I live there and I want a happy home and a calm home. And there's the idealism, right, that we're always talking about.
Oh,
that
so
goes along with
cute.
this.
Alina's so cute.
And the whole setup, it presumes that the association owners will step up and be responsible. But like
Exactly.
this whole notion,
Conscientious voters.
yeah,
right?
like this whole
So-
notion that you have a condominium association that's operating a multi-million
At a very
dollar
high level
rise,
here.
right? We got a huge budget in some of these buildings, millions of dollars.
I mean, and
It's
talk
like
to me
running
about
a
these
business.
these
It is.
budgets,
It is
right?
running.
Like,
it is running a
because
business, not for profit, but
I can see that you come against the realities of whatever this budget is. I mean, like you said, sometimes there's a big budget, I guess. We've
Yeah,
done very
sure.
well. I mean, I'm assuming money's not invested or anything, but like we've done very well. We got huge coffers. If everybody wants
Not always the case.
fancy
though.
flowers, we get everybody fancy flowers. But I assume, because this is Miami, that is not the case most
There's
of the
no
time.
foreclosures in
Fucking
Miami.
like huge budget.
well,
like,
it depends on what kind of association, the market values of the units, the expectations of the membership, but it's all defined first and foremost by like the maintenance responsibilities of the
Hey.
association. What do they have to, and insurance costs, right?
yes.
So management
Out of
costs.
control right
So yeah, so right now costs in this industry have gone up crazy, in terms of the insurance crisis. But just in a general sense, the location, the type of building, the necessary maintenance, the cost of insurance, it's all going to set up a reality that'll dictate what your type of budget you're looking at, your expenses, whether you should be, managed by a portfolio manager or like one of the major management companies in the industry.
Oh,
You know what I mean? With an on-site community association manager that runs everything.
like a real one, not an Alina.
I mean, if you're
On-site manager, for the record.
in a major association, you need technically you want to hire a third party to manage it. It has to be a community association manager licensed, right, by the DBPR, the
It'll work.
Department of Business and Professional Regulation. It's a highly regulated industry with
Mhm.
an administrative standard of care. We work with them day in, day out, representing associations. They care very much about the continuing education. Our firm, is a continuing education provider for community association managers. Like, you have to be accredited. So like,
They are.
Of course,
but like, it just goes to show that everybody needs to stay informed. Everybody cares. But, it's an intense industry that, people are really invested in.
They don't always stay informed.
Well, you'd hope they would, but unfortunately, it's not always the case.
No, it's definitely not, I learned.
So you guys on this board appoint this community association
No,
manager.
it's actually someone
You
contract.
hire,
Yeah,
right.
you
No, it's
Hire-
it's an independent contractor.
and
Although
they deal
some
with
associations self-manage,
Yeah.
which means the association, it like has an employee who's a manager,
Right.
who's like answering to the board directly. I'm not going to use this as an opportunity to like get on a soapbox, self-management versus a third-party manager, but
he's like, don't do that shit. No.
no, but I will say that, depending on the type of association, self-management, it may not be the best way to go in this current association environment.
Is it generally cheaper to self-manage? Is that why they turn
is.
around and do this?
It
Because
depends,
we
but-
can't pay for a professional manager that's going to deal with.
It has its own hosts of complications, difficulties, because now the association's an employer as opposed to working
Oh,
with an
God.
independent contractor.
Yeah.
You can control things contractually with your independent contractor in a different
Yeah.
way and dictate the terms of that engagement. Whereas with an employee, they're all yours, Like,
But that's just talking about that. I mean, I never had any idea how much work this was going to be, for the record.
No se te ocurrió.
No, I really didn't. But it's not just the management company. It's like the 8,000 vendors you deal
Of
with the community and all the batshit crazy psychos that live in the community. Because there's lots of normal homeowners that are like you and want the best. And then there's always the crazy fucking guy in the corner that has some crazy ass story and wants something completely off the rails and comes to every meeting to harass you about how you're taking kickbacks. And I'm like, bitch, you think I'd be living here if I was getting kickbacks? I'd be in my fucking mansion on Star Island, okay? Like, I'm not getting any sort of fucking kickback. But anyways, I digress. I digress.
I mean, it's a big
Fun time.
It's a big topic. Like there's recent homeowners association legislation because of the fear of kickbacks and need for regulation of the homeowners associations. There's a lot of concern about like financial fraud in associations.
Sure.
Owners feel like they don't have power to elect their boards in some of these cases.
They could go.
But it's like you have associations where nobody wants to run.
Right.
And then you have associations where people want to run, but they feel disenfranchised. They feel the process is corrupted somehow. So the legislature just enacted a bill that literally defines election fraud in HOAs. It has like literal definitions of like what
Oh,
constitutes election fraud, which by the
Wow.
way is like it's a crime, right? It's been like it's been adopted as a crime that
No mail-in ballots here.
But
no
it's-
mail-in
There are
ballots.
no hanging chads.
You have to show up to the election, John.
there's a lot of I mean it's a very intense time for community associations, to put it mildly.
He seems a little stressed out. Like he seems a little like I'm going through a lot in my profession right now. There's a lot of activity happening. Is that what it
A
is?
lot. I mean, this podcast is about current events, and there is unfortunately a lot of negative stuff going on in this space, right? And you mentioned the Champlain Tower, so I think this is a good moment to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, just in case someone doesn't know what that is, can you tell everyone about what happened in the Champlain Towers before we kind of delve into the law stuff?
Yeah, so several years ago there was an unspeakable tragedy, just like you couldn't even imagine it could even occur, where
Like this is
many
not a third
lives
world country. How does
many
this
lives
happen?
were lost. The building essentially collapsed.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to say why or what, or
Yeah.
just to say that it sent shockwaves. Obviously, the tragedy is so profound, but then it had shockwaves through the whole industry.
Of course.
New legislation, a focus on long-term deferred maintenance of
Yeah.
condominium high rises on the coast. And
Yeah.
and it's kind of altered how everyone thinks in terms of their own responsibilities personally.
Yeah.
Right? Even if the legal definition of certain standards didn't change, people are thinking to themselves, what are my responsibilities? How can I protect against? Safety is
Like-
first and foremost the number one concern of any association.
Like this shit
director,
is not
legal
coming
counsel.
down on my watch.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
at a minimum.
And this was all over national news. I mean, it did happen here in Surfside, Florida, in
Yeah.
our local community, but
Yep.
it was all over national news. And the crazy part is you hear this happening all the time in other countries, like
Yeah.
Leslie was saying.
I mean, this
like-
is not Honduras, guys. I mean, this
just,
is
just like a couple weeks ago, there was one that happened in Havana. There was a bunch of deaths in Havana, in Cuba, and I see it all the time in the news. But this is the United States. We expect certain standards, and again, our own bias, right? But it was absolutely crazy and tragic, and not just lives lost, but God, there was so much I heard so much about the lawsuits and so much that happened afterwards too. And um, let's talk about it because there are certifications you have to get, right? At the 40-year and the 50-year. Tell us a
Yeah,
little bit
so
about that.
the way it worked previously was in Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County was ahead of the state, and the municipalities at the city, county level, they have this recertification requirement, and it was 40 years, and then 10 years thereafter, 50 years, et cetera,
Right.
regarding the structural condition and electrical components of the buildings. And I'm oversimplifying,
Mhm.
but essentially, after Champlain Tower South, the legislatures said we're going to make this a statewide program by enacting a statute that basically put in a regime for milestone inspections.
Hmm.
Okay, so milestone inspections are meant to kind of be similar to or kind of parallel the recertification requirements. They're inspired by the recertification requirements in South Florida. And so now statewide associations have to, retain a qualified architect or engineer to perform, an engineer to perform, certain testing, certain inspections first. And if the inspections show substantial structure deterioration,
This is regardless of whether you're coming up on this 40-year or
well,
not.
I'll tell you the timing. It's for buildings that are 3 stories in height or more,
Uh-huh.
and basically it's 30 years, not 40.
As of 30 years,
And
we're starting to look at some stuff.
Yeah, and so and it's good to get ahead of deferred maintenance like that and be doing that at 25, 30 years rather than at 40 because it becomes exponentially more damaging
Yep.
to not deal with this long-term deferred maintenance and restoration. And there's sometimes developer defects that don't get remediated, which is a whole nother related conversation.
Sure.
But essentially, the engineer, the qualified professional does an inspection. If there's substantial structure deterioration, you go to what's phase 2, where you can do destructive testing, more invasive testing. There has to be a report generated. And that report is like a hot potato, got to go to the a
I
summary
was
has
just
to go
going
to
to
the
ask. So when this
a summary
engineer is
has to go
done
to the
with
members.
this,
Yeah, you got to go
who
to the
does that
building
get
department.
handed to make sure that we're all like, nothing to see here, no money to do this?
There's got to be a summary to the members within a certain amount of time. A copy goes to the building officials within a certain amount of time.
Oh.
The association has to start work within a certain amount of
Pays for
time.
all this.
Yeah, of course.
And
Well,
this
you
is
do.
this is paid for by the association, right? The members,
I,
right?
the
And
owner.
actually, within 3 mile buildings within 3 miles of the coast, the law initially said it was within 25 years, but
Oh,
but
jeez.
but at the time the law was enacted, some of the buildings within 3 miles of the coast were at like year 26 or
Yeah,
25.
of course
And it was like they didn't have a section to say, oh, that building is exempt for a couple of, like it was so it needed a
It
glitch
was a
bill.
mess,
It
yeah.
needed a glitch bill, and that glitch bill was enacted just a few months ago. And that's Senate Bill 154. And so the glitch bill kind of clarified some things, fixed some of these things. Now, if you're within 3 miles of the coast, it's up to the local department, the municipality, like whether it'll be 25
Like
years or
City of
30
Sunny
years.
Isles or whatever.
Yeah. And so now you asked about recertification. Miami-Dade County, for example, which already had a recertification, they basically amended their recertification process to kind of parallel the milestone inspection process. So they kind of go hand in hand. So like Miami-Dade lowered its recertification to 30 years. It's, or 25 years within the 3 miles. But for those buildings within 3 miles, it was delayed till, the end of 2024. And so right now the municipalities are still like processing Senate Bill 154 to update again.
They're still figuring shit out.
Yeah, but and actually there's like a deadline to report to the building official, like statewide. So like basically, there's going to be a building code review and a way to implement this at the local and state levels, to like come up with standards for this whole new, testing and inspection regime. And to make a long story short, in Miami-Dade County, right, you have recertification. It's coming up. If a building is, coming up on 30 years, and actually it's like there's timetables, right, that are coming due, and many associations are going to need their milestones done by December 1st, the 31st, 2024. Like it's coming right up.
Okay.
Some will be December 31st, 2025. Right. So, but this is like coming down the pike for many associations. They're dealing with it right now.
So like when the engineer comes up with, his or her fancy report that says like this building is fucked. This rebar is gone.
That's exactly
The
what it
salt
says,
water, and
by
that's
the way.
exactly what it
In
says.
those
And like
words.
Brett fucking like you are fucked. Okay.
And or you will be paying
and
out of
this
the
is
ass, so
and
you
this
are
is gonna
also
cost your fucking first child's and all my sperm at the sperm bank, because that's what we just talked about, right? Like, what happens when there's no money? What happens when there isn't enough money to cover?
I was thinking the same thing. I mean,
And then how often does this happen, right? Because I immediately see like, oh shit, why would anybody not do this, right? And it's just, I think the reality of,
this fault.
right?
Well, there's like a whole reality.
Yeah, I was about to say, as someone
Yeah.
who sat on a board, sure, you want to make it fucking
Of
beautiful
course.
and sunshine and rainbows.
That's my point.
Sunshine and rainbows
Costs
cost a lot of
money.
fucking money.
Let me basically the way it's there's a way there's like a big picture to this in a way it's kind of supposed to work, and that's a segue to like the other shoe dropping, which is the SIRS, the Structural Integrity Reserve Studies. I haven't even gotten to those.
Yeah.
That's a whole
You're
nother.
making engineers rich, my friend. That's
Well,
all I
it
hear
wasn't
right
me,
now.
but
I mean, this is excellent.
It wasn't me.
All my people.
You, Shaggy.
it wasn't me.
Sorry,
I know the song.
it wasn't me.
I'm thinking of the lyrics.
That everybody at Champlain Towers said, this shit is fucked. We need $1 gazillion to fix this whole fucking building.
But,
and every homeowner said, I knew us.
No,
We have
what
a shit ton of money to spend on this.
There's a term for it. And in that case, it's really tragic, but there's a term for it, which is moral hazard, right? Moral hazard, which is like in game theory and economics of like, if people don't have an incentive to do certain things, they have this incentive to do the wrong thing. So what happened was the way the law worked, and again, I'm not like here to criticize going backwards or whatever, but forever, the way it could work is that every year associations are supposed to get a reserve study.
Sure.
Not every year. They don't have to get a reserve study every year. Correct me. I'm going to correct myself. Every year the association has to budget for reserves, right? Every year the association has to budget for reserves. You get a reserve study periodically to keep it updated, but basically you budget for reserves for certain mandatory components, right? The roof, this, that, the other. And so, or components with
basics,
replacement,
right.
and components with replacement costs over $10,000. And you have to, you get a reserve study that basically says the remaining useful life, the ultimate estimated replacement cost, and you fund a little bit every year so that by the end of its life, it'll be all funded in your special account that can't be used for anything else.
Puppies
So you're supposed to save money for this. It's like put the money aside, but of course.
So that was statutory.
Yes,
that was
statutory.
guideline.
However, statutory.
To be fiscally responsible.
But there were two issues
in Miami.
Yeah, there are two issues. There's more than two issues, but I'll boil it down I'll boil it down to the two biggest issues, which are one, the law gave members a right to waive or reduce
to kick
the
it down
reserves, to kick the can down the road.
And
all it took to do this was a majority of a quorum of the members.
Oh,
so as long as you have some percentage of the members show up at the meeting, 33 1/3, a majority of those members could just say. Right, 17 owners in an association with the right side could just be like, nah, another day.
We got money for that.
And by the way, eventually, the law said you have to put in the proxy form that waiving or reducing reserves will lead to special assessments or some other literally a statutory disclosure. You have to put in the proxy so that when people say yes. That's right. They have to see, like, oh wait,
right? So they don't cry 5 years from now when they owe me $100,000.
And so the economic reality of it is, if you use those monies for other things with the proper member vote, or if you waive or reduce with the proper member vote, you're going to down the line have a problematic special assessment. If it's problematic, some associations are like, yeah, no problem, we'll stroke a check. But that's not always the case. It's not often the case. The other issue is this is different. Even though you have these mandatory reserves for certain components, there was a question of, I'm a reserve study specialist. Can I even, as an industry, and again, I'm not imputing this to any particular reserve study specialist.
Allegedly.
But as an industry, Like as part of the industry standards for doing these reserve studies, there's a question of can I even come up with a replacement cost or useful life for the structure?
Correct.
So like how can I even estimate what it takes to you don't replace the structure.
You don't
So
replace
what would
the
happen?
rebar, guys.
But so
I
what
mean,
could happen? In some reserve studies, you literally had structure. We can't tell you.
Yeah.
We can't tell you what it's going to
How
cost.
useful.
Right. So what happens is even if you fully reserved, you're not necessarily reserving for structural deferred maintenance or restoration at year 35, 40.
Right.
Even if you had fully reserved, it was like kind of like
Right.
this.
The
this-
report didn't say this building is fucked, right? Like
Yeah,
that, exactly.
All,
That's problem
all
number
buildings
2.
age. All buildings,
All buildings
age
are
and event-
old and have issues and
And
whatever.
fucked, yeah.
And the report, I used
So-
to be a civil engineer for 6 years. I am
Yeah,
fully
I
aware
should have started
that my
by telling you
reports are
the history.
are not, I dealt more with drainage systems
But
and
it's- but
whatever.
it's
But I
like,
don't say this drainage
we-
system is fucked. I say
we
the
need to do
contractor who
further-
ladrón. Like,
we need to do further investigation.
Yes,
We can't say
we
everything.
cannot,
Disclaimer.
we cannot
Disclaimer.
say.
But the truth is that so there was this in some reserve studies, right? In many associations, they just didn't reserve for structural deferred maintenance. Then you have another issue, which is one of the big things our firm does is we litigate construction defect claims. When the association turns over from the developer, it's really like imperative. It's
Oh,
imperative
man.
to like do due diligence to get to the heart of potential structural issues beneath the surface. Because what happens is in many associations, the structural defects, they're what's called latent. They're
Uh-huh.
hidden, right? So like you will never know they're there until many years later. But what happens is
They're well hidden.
But
too.
by the time they manifest, it's past what's called the statute of repose, which is like a final date to sue. So if you have a structural problem, slowly corroding rebar, whatever, eventually there's spawn. You may not even see the physical manifestation of that until many years after turnover, by which point it may be too late to sue the developer
You're preaching
and
to
the
the choir, my
contractors.
friend.
And I just want to say this, that this year, no. Yeah, this year, the legislature lowered the statute of repose from 10 years to 7, making it even, yes, I know. I was same phrase. That's a phrase.
Counterproductive?
I agree. It's so counterintuitive. It's crazy. But I guess
The
crazy is a
construction
strong
lobby.
word.
Good job.
But let me say, yeah,
See,
you
listen,
have this issue, which is if you catch construction defects at the beginning, you can seek recovery from construction and design professionals so the association doesn't have to eventually pay for the systemic problems that result from them. But if you lower the statute of repose, you're putting more pressure on associations to move quickly to do that
I don't know
immediately.
anything about construction.
And so, like,
Well,
and
this
many
just happened.
associations, some associations, they kind of want to take the easy way out. They don't want
Why
to
do you
the,
want to be the one to
like,
engage in
just to
litigation against
think
the
of-
contractor?
but to put in a different way, first of all, you have all kinds of legal expenses. You have all kinds of engineering costs
Yes.
to do the testing. Not to mention,
100%.
if you just base that off a visual inspection and you don't have manifestation of these defects and you don't do sampling and destructive testing to get underneath the
Wow.
surface, you may not even know about a problem that won't
You're not.
materialize.
No.
So you have to put upfront engineering costs to
Okay.
this. And that's, some associations don't see that point of view and they want to,
How about almost none?
no, not the associations we represent,
but
but
that's my point. No. But
All
let me
contractors are
pause.
fucking ladrones.
No.
not me who said that.
I'm an attorney and I sat on the board. And so I think we are immediately risk averse and thinking about the potential downfalls
Well,
of
of
things.
course.
Convincing
But-
non-attorneys, which is, by the way, what most of the community is, that you need to spend money on studies, okay? Like a lot of fucking money and a lot of legal fees that go along with that. And that all this is worth it to meet with some duty that's written into the law is just impossible.
But seeking that
fucking impossible. We
but
just want to do that.
It's
Like,
but seeking that recovery early, you now have some source of funds you can put in the reserves. You could use to defray the costs of these defects.
Man.
And those defects, they have residual effects.
Yeah.
Many years later, they make things worse. And these problems, if you don't do structural restoration, it just gets worse and worse. So and so by updating the timetable to 25, 30 years, you're expediting some responsible buildings. They'll deal with these things in a timely manner. They'll do timely restoration work to avoid the exponential increase of problems and the expense down the line. But if
Sure.
if you haven't really done that, it's just that much more expensive when it's time to do it. You haven't funded the reserves fully. You maybe didn't even have a reserve account for that. And now all of a sudden, what do you have to do? You have to specially assess, which wham, it slams an owner right in the face. Oh my God, I've got to come out of pocket
Right.
for this amount of money. And in some of these associations, we're talking a very large amount of money.
Buco bucks. So we were talking about buco bucks. Yeah, it's huge money. I mean, and thinking about special assessments, you're dealing with everyday homeowners. Most people don't.
That's when I go
have-
after Alina. Like, what do you mean I gotta pay $10,000?
100%. You want to get a mob of angry homeowners? Tell them that you're assessing them. And then I don't care where you fucking get it, but you better get $10,000, which you got to pay in the next 6 months, by the way.
You gave all our
Because
money
we
to
need
the lawn
redo the
boy.
building. Yeah,
That's
no,
your
for real.
cousin.
They freak out, man. I'm actually dealing with it right now. Not where I was the homeowner, but my parents' condo that we got them. They have a huge assessment going on right now. And, my father recently passed away, and that helped pay for some of the assessment at Arn. But there's a lot of elderly people in that building, retired people that live on a budget. And if you live on, even if you're not elderly and retired, you live on a budget. Everyday people live on a budget. You don't have this money to spend. Like, even if you want to improve it, they just don't have it. They don't have it.
In some associations, the declaration actually prohibits you from passing a special assessment over a certain amount of money without a membership vote.
Yeah.
There's case law that I think supports potentially assessing anyway when you have necessity, because you can't allow the building to go to waste. So that's illegal. But frankly, I think the statute should state clearly that the declaration cannot prevent an adoption of a special assessment or require a member vote when you need to pass a special assessment to perform basic maintenance functions. We're not talking about improvements or
New
material
flowers, no.
alterations. We're talking about
Yeah.
necessary maintenance or capital maintenance,
The roof.
yeah. But some associations feel paralyzed by those provisions.
Yeah,
They don't feel they can
I
get the
believe
member votes, which is a shame, Then there's also, associations can borrow money. Borrowing has significant costs, but it could potentially give cash flow so you can extend the repayment period, right? So we deal with a lot of that now.
We tried to do it. I'm telling you from experience. Tell them that we're taking out a loan we're going to pay over 10 years. They don't like that either. Nobody wants to spend money.
The fact is, it has to be done. The fact is, the money has to be spent.
You have no choice. But so we're talking about when there is no money. So let's talk for a second. I want to take us to condo terminations.
Wait. I have, hold on, before that. Do association boards have to have a lawyer? Because they cannot be operating on their own, can they? Is there something in the statute that says you monkeys don't know what the fuck you're doing? You must have a lawyer represent you.
It would first of all, there's the unlicensed practice of law, right?
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, if you don't have a lawyer, there are certain things you just can't do without a lawyer.
Yeah.
Contracts, this, that, the other.
You can't represent yourself in this.
Oh, even
you
can't.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So that's
okay.
You
How many
can't.
Conversations I had about whether or not we should pay legal fees.
No,
You can't hire a third party who's not a lawyer to do legal stuff.
Because I'm a lawyer.
To do the practice of law. But if you're a director, maybe you feel hey, I'm not going to hire a third party. I'm just going to represent what. But think about it, this isn't just you're representing.
Correct.
You're trying to do legal stuff for an entity.
That's why I
and
thought
so
maybe.
it becomes. This is where we talked about recklessness, right? If you're not working with legal counsel on legal issues, and then what right do you have to rely on it? What can you base reasonableness off of? So it probably would be inherently unreasonable to be on a board without legal counsel to confer with as to certain legal issues that need legal counsel. I mean, I guess if a director's a lawyer, but even then, there's all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm a lawyer, my friend. I don't know none of this shit.
Let me cut through the legal, association should have a lawyer.
Yes. Yeah. Gente en Hialeah, presta atención. You need a lawyer.
Do you know how many conversations I had where they're like, you're a lawyer? I'm like, I'm not that kind of lawyer.
Associations.
Oh shit about condo
I'm
law.
an
Dude, I'm an
immigration.
immigration lawyer. No, I cannot be
Associations need a lawyer.
legal fee to a condo.
And you know what? This is a big public service announcement. I'm full of cliches. A stitch in time saves 9, right? This. So, but
At the bottom.
but basically, if you think you're saving money by not working with a lawyer,
Right.
and not negotiating that contract with a lawyer, or hey, I don't want to ask the lawyer.
Wild.
But then what
This is
happens is
wild.
it costs much more
In
to
Spanish,
clean up the mess.
in Spanish, we say "lo barato sale caro," which means cheap shit is very expensive.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Exactly.
Cheap shit is very expensive. So no, so I want to go back to this when we have no money, right? Let's talk about condo terminations. You and I were briefly discussing it before we came on, and I think this is fascinating. So tell everybody who's listening, what's a condo termination?
Sure. So a condo termination is a process. What happens in a condominium? I get into so basically property has units and common elements owned by all the unit owners.
Right,
And
like
it's
the
and it's
pool, the
like
patio.
literally submitted to condominium ownership through its condo declaration. So now you have this property set up where owners own the units, they own the common elements and pertinent shares that are attached to their units. A termination ends that. It basically frees the whole property from the declaration, from the ownership structure. Everybody just owns it all, but this is usually done in the context of either restarting a new condominium from scratch or redeveloping the land.
You're knocking this shit down.
Yeah, so you knock it down and replace it
'Cause
with
I
a
was gonna
new
say, who owns this
building with a
fucking
new
pool now?
condominium declaration.
Like,
Because absent a termination to get rid of that condominium form, you can't just transfer
yeah.
you could, there's ways, it's complicated, but a termination is a simple way to end that condo declaration, free up the entire property so that it can be redeveloped into something new with a new condominium form of ownership or other form of ownership, declaration, what have you. And a termination, it fundamentally changes what everybody's owning because you own a unit that's yours, but a termination can literally end your ownership of that unit. It's
Right.
a forced buyout in many ways.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Forced buyout.
it's like a forced buyout. And so, it's a very technical process. I'm not going to go into all the technicalities. Suffice it to say that there's a couple of instances where terminations come into play. First, there can be what's called an optional termination, right? Where, for redevelopment, for whatever purposes, you get a sufficient number of votes to optionally terminate. Okay, when would that occur? When you have a redeveloper buying up units, they get to a critical mass, they try to terminate. You have catastrophe termination, right? Where you have a hurricane, it pretty much destroys. So there's a different voting threshold for a catastrophe termination where you need to reconstruct it. It would be wasteful to do so.
Yeah, but for example, go ahead. You had
and then the other one is you could go to court and get a termination.
Oh, interesting.
It's like a
What is it, like a
statute. It's
partition?
overlooked. Yeah, it's like a statutory proceeding to terminate. It was actually done with Champlain Tower South when a building collapsed. Rather than go through these votes and all these corporate, they just basically said we need to file an action to terminate this condo because it's destroyed, this and that.
Yeah.
So I have an interesting story about this. And when I was young, when I was a kid, my parents had a condo in Miami Beach. It was our weekend property and whatever. We used to fish every weekend and go out to the beach every weekend. And at some point, there were a lot of repairs that had to be made. There was going to be a giant assessment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Couldn't afford it. Not my parents, just in general, the community. It wasn't happening. It was mostly retired people community. It was only a 2-story building, so it was a little place. Had a great piece of land, but little place. And so a developer came in and offered to buy everybody out because we couldn't make the repair.
Big Daddy Trump said, "I'm gonna put a massive high rise here.
Exactly
Get the fuck out."
It's where the Trump Towers were. That's exactly where it was at. But anyways, that being said, I remember it being a complete fucking nightmare because some people wanted in, some people didn't. God, I remember those condo association meetings. I was a kid, and I remember these condo association.
He was roped in from a childhood.
The yelling increased
The trauma.
The trauma.
Maybe that's what led to her becoming a lawyer to help other people.
Because it required 100%. So everyone.
So there's one old lady holdout that's like, "I'm not leaving."
Everyone had to be on board, and getting every condo owner to agree to this was nearly impossible. So this was meeting upon meeting.
It's so funny because when I was in property law at law school, it was they were talking about all this and it was so theoretical. And I'm like, I'll never deal with this in my practice. And so now, of course, it's holdouts and transaction costs but that's what it's all about holdouts and how difficult it is to get everybody together. And it used to be right. And it used to be that some declarations, 75%, some declarations, 100%. But what happens is the statute has evolved. right? There was an amendment to the termination statute that really overhauled procedures, but also the voting requirements to like optionally terminate. And that has evolved over the years. First, it was you could terminate voluntarily with 80% of the membership,
There you go.
but
It changed in
10%.
2007.
Yeah.
I looked it up.
Wow.
And this was after our nightmare with 100%.
Yeah. So then 10% could block. That how do you block? You give objections in a timely manner. But then
Oh, you're gonna rally your neighbors.
But then it's such a controversial concept.
Yeah.
There was an outcry like, oh, we can't.
like this
people
is a
have
taking.
people have
This is
homestead
like
rights. Yeah.
Constitutional.
So what did they do?
You're
They
taking my shit.
lowered the block to it's 5%. So 5% could block. So it's like a smaller percentage of owners could block, not 10%, but 5. So it's even harder to terminate. And so you have this 80% in favor, 5% can block.
Are these in the condo
more
docs,
and more
or are these in the
it's in the statute. This is statutory.
now.
So
And-
you
and
should
actually,
know
this
these
is a
laws
really-
before you.
This is a huge issue. Like literally there's litigation left and right over this because the statute, right? It's changed, but docs, what law governs the docs? What law governs that condo? So like some condominiums say, this condominium is submitted to the condominium form of ownership pursuant to the Condominium Act as it may be renumbered. So like that's interpreted to mean in like 1980, like whenever that declaration was recorded, right? Like it's submitted to the Condominium Act that exists at that time. Only when the declaration has something called Kaufman language, which is like as amended from time to time.
Yeah.
Does like the statutory changes automatically apply? And there's been like tons of litigation on this.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
like if it says Condominium Act as amended from time to time, the new law applies. If it says Condominium Act, the old law applies. So what do redevelopers do? They amend the declaration to add Kaufman language. And so now there's all kinds of litigation over, can you just like amend the declaration, add
Right.
Kaufman language? It took 100.
With what percentage of these
Right,
people
with
that show
what
up to meeting
Yeah, but with what percentage can you amend?
don't even know what they're
Does
talking
a
about?
normal amendment, right? And maybe some declarations have special provisions that says if you alter the statute that applies or voting rights of to terminate, that requires 100% vote. But if it doesn't say that, can you just amend with like 66 2/3 to add Kaufman language? Now all of a sudden you have this other. So this is a very
Like hostile takeover shit.
This
right
is
here.
like technical
condo style.
It's
like,
technical. It's a very dynamic area of law with new cases and
Need a lawyer. Like,
oh, yeah.
needs a lawyer for this.
You know,
Yeah. Jose Papito was a lawyer in Cuba, bro.
But there's-
It's fine. It's
There's
fine.
definitely strength in numbers where if owners, use their power to work
This is
together.
horrifying.
It's a lot of, game theory, It's like,
Theory.
it's like, hey, we got a big enough block,
Oh, man.
well, but it's being litigated right now. Associations have to be eyes open in dealing with that reality.
Yeah.
Some documents can have provisions that are very good protections against this. And other documents can be very favorable to this. And it's a fluid thing and it can change. So like some associations are like, maybe that's a concept that we welcome because, we'll talk about the structural integrity reserves. Reserves are going to go up and all these capital improvements need to be done. And we don't want to pay for that. We think it's waste based upon the value of the units. We want to sell out.
Getting more expensive.
Yeah, but other associations are like, hell no, we don't want to be bought out. We got to protect ourselves from this or we want to have leverage. Some associations are interested, but want to leverage the process by doing it a certain way so that the association is dictating the terms of engagement, not somebody like kind of scooping up units, behind the scenes, right?
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So if someone is in the market to buy in a property that has an HOA, that has this condo, whatever.
Oh, I'll have that
They-
condominium.
Yeah. So they should really get a copy of this, I'm sure, very large document with all of the
It's actually
rules.
required to be
And
disclosed
should they
during the sale.
immediately call someone like you to review such
Oh,
things?
yeah,
Do
I
you have
mean,
like a package? Like, hey,
we-
I'll review all the shit show you're about to enter into
we
for $5,000.
this is a very dynamic area.
Like-
we look at this from the perspective of the association who may
Yeah.
be dealing with this, who is interested in thinking about
No,
it.
screw them. From the
but
homeowner.
From the but from the we look at this from the acquirer's perspective, right? We represent acquirers who are like, what are going to be the steps we need to take? in order to
And
acquire units here?
reserves,
What are the
tell
covenants?
you what your reserves are,
What
I
are the
guess, right?
covenants that apply?
In
What
the different buckets.
there's different issues. There's like purchase and sale restrictions.
Sure.
Some condominium declarations say there's a right of first refusal for the association. Some say there's a right of first refusal that another owner can exercise as like the designee of the association. So now the association can can use that right of first refusal to push units a certain way. There's also, restrictions on transfers where some association declarations say you cannot own more than X number of units through any affiliates.
Wow.
Some say no corporations can own
serious
units.
here.
Right. So like you have to think about what's the landscape of these governing documents, what restrictions apply, how can we deal with that reality? So we're always thinking about those legal angles.
But yeah, when you're buying a property, part of it, if there is an HOA, generally involves them vetting you and doing a whole application for them to.
I mean, it sounds like the fucking homeowner should be vetting them.
Well, it goes two ways. No,
That's
no,
a really good point.
it
That's a
goes
funny
both
point
ways.
though, because
I mean, my point
that's
is
like
you
a
need to have
really-
a package for
that's-
your owners to call you.
But-
he takes Venmo,
this
Zelle,
is like
credit
a big
card.
issue right now. This is actually what you're talking about is a big issue right now. Like,
Yeah.
it's never been more important in terms of the requirements and disclosures relating to sales
To buy into
and
this
what
shit
you
show.
have to disclose to third parties and what you don't have to disclose and like how do you deal with these requests. And like the Miami-Dade has a registry that, as of this February, it started where condominiums had to report information about themselves and upload certain reports. So now theoretically there could be, there's like a registry, a database. You also have, you also have laws that require certain documents now. The milestone, has to be like, there's rescission rights for contracts if the documents aren't available.
I very much remember when we purchased asking the realtor on the other side of the deal, are the reserves healthy?
Well, I
Good
was
luck
just
getting an
hold
answer
on,
to
hold
that
on, because
question.
that
I asked because
right?
I'm
that's exactly where I was going with
That's
this,
still-
right?
the due
I want to
diligence-
buy
The
something.
due diligence for a condominium association is so complex and important and
But
difficult.
here's the thing.
It's
The
but who's
realtor's
going to
gonna
be
tell
like,
you
yes,
whatever the
check,
fuck.
go
Right.
ahead.
I was exactly
Nobody.
going to say
Where
this.
we at?
The
Nobody.
realtor's going to tell you whatever the fuck you need to
I
know
know.
to buy the
They
property,
can't
right?
lie to me, or then we have.
But what the fuck do they know? I mean, I
It's
assume
a
the
very
only person that can
impossible, like-
assess whether this bucket of money that has been reserved or whatever actually means anything compared to that building, right? I mean, how would I, as a third party, know that maybe I see a reserve of $500,000? I think that's fucking great, and you immediately
Like,
go,
as-
"This is trash."
As a lawyer who represents associations and
know
is
that.
familiar with the industry, I'd have a sense. There's different
Right. Of
dynamics in play. It's complex. But like,
I
for
would-
example, I might know that like at certain years, you're more likely to have
Sure.
this type of project. If it wasn't done, this next project is going to
Precisely.
be worse. Did defects get dealt with? Have they been reserving? Have they not been reserving? Oh, it's been this many years. Recertifications
Jonathan,
coming
this is
up.
a whole stream
special
of income
assessment.
you are not marketing to, Jonathan. Potential new homeowners need
Due
to do
diligence are
due
us.
diligence
Yeah, due
assessment
diligence are us.
on this shit show they're about to buy into. I
No, but it's
mean,
true. When you're buying, you need to. One of the most important questions is, when was this built? 100%.
Yeah, of
Like,
course. Yeah.
that was the first thing we'd ask, because I want to know if you're coming up on 20, 30, like these are big milestones. You want to keep, if your building was built in the last 15 years or so, pretty solid.
But
for
this
now.
goes back.
for now.
This goes back to what we were talking about in terms of milestone, and then the other thing, structural integrity reserve study. So, like, these are things that are going to be required. They have to be available for buyers, so buyers can see the structural integrity reserve study, which is like, it's like a reserve study, but geared towards the structural components. And it takes that issue of structural components. How do you reserve them?
Yeah.
And it kind of answers that in the sense that it does answer that in the sense that certain components you must reserve for, you must get a study for if you have a building that's over 3 stories or more in height and you're a condominium, and that commercial condominiums accepted. But basically you now have to get a certain kind of study with a certain kind of professional who can tell you what the remaining useful life is or the deferred maintenance. So even if you don't replace it, what's the deferred maintenance expense to do major capital maintenance over many years, like restoration? And actually in Senate Bill 154, people were panicking of like, in 2025, right? You're going to have your structural reserve study done by the end of 2024. Then you start to have to fund these structural integrity reserves. And by the way, let's say you have a structural integrity deferred maintenance expense of X million, and it's the useful life before you should do that maintenance is 2 years. and you didn't ever reserve for that.
Yeah, you should.
Now, all of a sudden, the law requires that the next, starting 2025, and this was changed a little bit in Senate Bill 154, but originally 4D 2 years ago, last year, I should say, it basically said you have to fund this. And you have to fund the useful life through that year. You didn't have to fund the total replacement cost, but you had to be on schedule to be fully funded, which means if you had never reserved before for that, all of a sudden it hits you, wham,
Right.
you have only 2 years left. You now got to fund everything up to 2 years left immediately. And that would be in the reserves, in the budget, not even a special assessment, in the budget. And that couldn't be waived or reduced. And so Senate Bill 154 this year, it tries to alleviate this a little bit and tinker with it in subtle ways. But let me just put it this way. It's still that's still the way it is. If you don't have to do the milestone till 2025, you can get an extra year, to do the reserve study. Also, if the expert says, oh, I can't tell you the remaining useful life, it's too long, it's too far out. I can't tell you deferred maintenance. I don't recommend deferred maintenance. It's too far out. Then you don't have to do it. You don't have to add it. You don't have to add a reserve if the expert says last year 4D never had that out, but now it's a little bit of a loophole where if the study basically says, oh, we don't know how long it's going to last, we can't give you deferred maintenance, we don't recommend deferred maintenance. Now, it would, the professional who's providing.
Make sure that asshole has a lot of insurance.
Yeah. The professional providing. The professional providing that reserve study has to be able to stand behind that. It's got to be a reasonable.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have deferred maintenance that needs to be done and it's recommended, and the reserve study can't say, oh, no deferred maintenance is recommended. But it gives a little bit more of a safety valve if it's really far out. But once it becomes something that's got to be recommended, you start accumulating it. But it's still a very heavy financial burden.
Huge.
Up front, in the short term. So this is a segue for both disclosures with transfers, where you're buying a unit, you want to know what that structural integrity reserve study says.
Know all of this.
And then the other thing is you want to know what's in the budget for these structural integrity reserve. And then for purposes of, this kind of financial stress makes a condominium unit owner and the board say, hey, maybe it's time to, call it quits on this whole condominium thing.
What does that mean? Call it quits on the condominium? We're selling to Big Daddy Trump? What does that mean?
So we were kind of talking about all of this is in place to protect technically the homeowners. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. So what is in place to help homeowners when there's actual shit going down on the board? So let's talk about the hammocks. Let's talk about the
what?
That's where I want to talk about the hammocks. So there's this area here in South Florida called the hammocks, and they were all over the news recently. Leslie lives in a bubble.
Where's the hammocks?
No idea. You're gonna have
the
to tell
hammocks.
Out west, there was a big homeowner association community. Here's my lawyer. I'm not. This is all from public. Whatever. I say nothing. Allegedly, I say nothing. Elina, you can describe it.
Okay, at the hammocks, what happened?
No,
it's not really a laughing matter. People were arrested.
Oh,
it was
arrest.
There were arrests. Allegations of a highly complicated criminal conspiracy. Fraud.
But I mean, what kind of criminal conspiracy?
Theft,
my cousin is
again. I'm not accused. I'm just relaying what's in the news.
No, it's all alleged. But what type of fraud are we talking? My cousin's a landscaper and he gives me a kickback. What are we talking about? I just stole the fucking money from the budget thing.
Well, let's just
from the reserve.
Allegedly.
Let's just speak in the abstract about what theoretically could happen.
Theoretically, in a place in Hialeah.
Yeah, in law school they call it bad acre. Okay.
Bad acre.
Black acre, bad acre.
In law school they call it bad acre. Where the bad actor is on the board.
Live.
And there's all kinds of theoretical things that could be done in bad acre that are very bad.
And they had a lot of money in bad.
And here, this is not a lesson on how to, but it's a lesson of vigilance.
Did they have a lawyer?
Look,
in Bad Acre?
Yeah. In Hialeah.
Bad Acre might have a lawyer.
Might have bad lawyer.
But you know what? bad acre may only give the lawyer certain information.
That's true.
The lawyer, maybe bad acre wants to save money on legal fees.
Save like the legal fees.
Bad acre may work with vendors who are straw men
Oh,
for the people on the
fake P&Ls.
Yeah,
Got
so like
it. Bad Acre has a lot of
there's
stuff.
like entities that are
This
created,
is sophisticated Bad Acre.
fraudulent like financial chicanery.
You're right.
It's a sunny place for shady people.
It
as I like
is.
to
It
remind
is.
everyone.
Every episode, we have to be reminded.
So I mean, look, in a very simple sense, directors can't receive improper personal benefits.
yes.
They can't, take money from the association, kickbacks, that kind of thing. Again, like I said, the HOA law, clarifies some of these things even more now, but it's always been a breach of fiduciary duty to do that. Arguably already criminal. There's more refined specific crimes about it now. But so there can be very complicated, sophisticated schemes to defraud an association,
But,
and it's a horror.
like,
but
how long were these people on the board? Like this one that was there for 4 years, which sounds really sketchy. I don't know.
but let me say, but let me
Because somebody's
explain.
gonna come right after you,
Let me
right?
explain a part of the dynamic. Let me play.
No?
A part of the dynamic is that there's an issue of who's on this.
Who's on
Is
first?
this like something that law enforcement's going to jump on? And what kind of due diligence and investigation will warrant further investigation by law enforcement? The Division of Condominiums, which fields complaints for condominiums, they previously weren't even dealing with HOAs.
No, I'm thinking the next HOA people look at whatever, financial reporting metrics you give to the next and go, what the fuck is
that's
this,
why
Elina?
associations need to have financial reporting. They need to have financial statements.
Yeah, you also pay out of the wazoo.
And a new,
I
a new board
a
should
bookkeeper.
Yeah, if there's a red flag, a new board can investigate the old board, and the old the old things that were going on to try to capture back some of that. Go after fidelity bonds that associations have to keep.
So this became like an ongoing, like, I don't want to sue my neighbor. They might have done.
But let me just put this out there that, like, who's enforced, like, for unit owners often get desperate and act improperly.
Yeah.
Because they don't have an outlet that's constructive or know any better to do things the right way.
Yeah.
You have certain inspection rights to look at records. You could get all the records of an association. You can have a CPA for performing forensic audit of all the association records on your
from
dime.
Arthur Anderson.
But that's the thing, on your dime. But like, it's not just the association has the CPA do this, but an owner, right, who's skeptical. What do? They could have another CPA look at the CPA audit, say, help me, let me understand. They could have the CPA do a forensic audit of the books and records. What's going on? But what's the smoke that leads them to investigate whether there's fire?
Oh, I would assume
what's that signal?
Broke.
Not to mention, what owner incentive is there to spend money out of their pocket for the benefit of everybody? Because owners have this fractional interest. And one owner is going to have to foot this bill.
No, for sure.
For the entire community. You know what I mean? It's like a selfless thing to say, I'm going to be the one who sheriffs this place.
Yeah.
Who is going to get this investigation done. Who's going to go to the authorities.
It only takes one though, Jonathan.
Hey,
Wait, I'm assuming that the board though
but association
can investigate.
Yeah, but again, until you take over the board, and that's why there was so much frustration. For example, at the Hammocks, there was frustration of, can we get elected? Are they messing with the election?
Get elected.
Please, there was allegations of like a
fantastic.
canceled election meeting, like at the last second. It's like really sordid.
Oh my God, this is like South America all over again. Like the ballots aren't even real. Like.
I like to say that it's good for owners to try to work together to
Of course.
to investigate. What I mean by that is owners should get, if an owner has suspicions or problems, they should pool together to try to do these inspections, to try to collaborate, to pool resources, to take these investigations further, maybe get help from legal counsel. But then, there's an offshoot to this, which is really unfortunate, which is like the opposite of this. It's like a mirror funhouse image of this, which is when a group of owners goes negative. It curdles.
It's a witch hunt.
It curdles. Like, it's the opposite of this. Like, on the one hand, you have situations where owners are rightfully frustrated and don't have an avenue or relief, and they should get together and investigate and keep the association in compliance however you can, with whatever legal tools that aren't ideal for that. But in the flip side, owners who feel stymied, who don't feel like they have that outlet, they go negative. they harass sometimes. Not all.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah.
all. Many owners are good, but some owners start to harass, become
They get fucking
toxic.
crazy.
They like
Crazy.
insult. They do things that are it's not just mere dissension or disagreement, which is
Yeah,
fine.
100%.
Everybody, of course, free speech, but like it goes beyond that into like harassment, stalking sometimes, violence,
Oh yeah.
making people miserable,
Oh yeah.
violating, using these records tools to abuse, like, and making unfounded accusations, and like, so it
People
can,
are crazy.
so it kind
No
of goes,
boundaries.
it
No
kind of goes
boundaries.
both ways. Like sometimes the owner effort is in good faith
Sure.
and it's like meant to be constructive, even if maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. But other times owner efforts in bad faith and very destructive.
Oh yeah.
And we deal with that too. That's like something that's part of the association reality. And actually the bad actors in general kind of poison the industry, in that when you have enough negative, bad faith actors, when a good, positive group of owners
I
is trying
see.
to bring good light, they're
Right.
scrutinized as if they could
They're
become
crazy.
bad
They're the
actors.
crazies.
Not always, not,
Right.
but like,
Like
there's
Elina having sat on
there's
a
a
board already
danger
would
of
be
like,
like, this
yeah,
person's nuts.
there's a
Like,
danger
you're
of,
already skewed to that.
yeah, there's a danger that like people are like desensitized or like think, oh,
Yeah.
just another group of bad actors. But no, it may be they have a reasonable gripe. Who knows?
I mean, I hear that as someone who sat on a board for a couple of years. I hear that, but man, people are batshit crazy too. I'll tell you. Like, I just some of the things that are said, some of the just there are boundaries that you shouldn't cross, and homeowners can be cray cray. I'm just saying. Some of it comes from a good place of wanting to better the community, and some of it is just fucking crazy. Like you start asking people for $5 more than what they think they're supposed to be paying, and it becomes a witch hunt of you are stealing our money. No, have you looked at the cost of roofing? Because it has gone up, my friends, in the last couple of years. And nobody wants to be told they need to pay more money. No one wants to be told they need to spend more in legal fees. Man, you want to get a group of homeowners angry? Tell them we need to spend more in legal fees. I learned the fucking hard way, okay? That me telling them that I cannot be our legal representative
After you've already been thrown on this board.
the fuck
I
is
love
happening
it.
right now. But anyways, we're not gonna. I digress. I digress.
But we see all kinds of things,
What's the
and
craziest thing you've ever seen?
um,
You gotta have some good stories.
I've seen a lot of different. I've seen a lot of different
You gotta
kinds of
have some good
things.
stories.
I've seen a lot of different kinds of things. So like, it's tough to pinpoint one thing. One of the craziest things that's ever happened in my career is a cyber stalking injunction,
Oof.
where we had to literally a director and a manager were being like tormented by email,
Yeah.
just tormented with threats, not just like insults, but like insults and
Actual
threats, like,
threats.
I'm gonna do this, and so
Scary.
and so
And you all
working
live next door to each other.
and so
that's
working
crazy.
I'm telling you, it could be scary.
yeah, working
Been
together with the management team and the director, like they filed, and we for the association sought an injunction pursuant for cyber stalking because they were using email in this way, harassing, a threat.
Yeah.
And this owner came to this hearing, and like, I remember he had some injury on his foot and put it on the table in front of the judge, said he was meeting with President Obama, like a little bit,
Not well in the head.
it was a crazy hearing. It was,
Obama didn't come.
but we got a cyber stalking injunction, and
Hillary's emails.
the injunction can like prevent them from being in the management office except for certain office hours or times, or make them stay 40 feet away. No weapons.
Knock on my
Right?
door.
No
in my
weapons.
house.
That's important. If you have an
Okay.
order, right?
Weapons. Oh my God.
No idea.
You can't come within 50 feet of this director who you've been harassing. You can't communicate by email to individuals. You can only use this specific designated email address.
Right.
You'd be surprised.
Email the
and
management company.
actually,
Don't spam me on my personal email.
yeah, and actually it did normalize, like it settled the situation down. So that was one of the craziest things I've dealt with, where you see actual threats, and that's not an isolated incident. I've seen that since, like, it's something we deal with periodically, and it's very frightening. Imagine you're a volunteer director and you're receiving threats. It's horrifying. So like, there's different alternatives to that. It's not just stalking. There's other things you could do. Seek, injunctive relief to combat a nuisance, bring a lawsuit, or, there's other relief. You could obviously talk to law enforcement if there's threats, right? And law enforcement might get a protective order to prevent them from having a weapon. Like, there's all kinds of things you deal with that. But those are some of the craziest things. And of course, you see crazy things with like infestations.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
some of the craziest things I've seen are photos of like hoarders
Oh,
and like
yeah. Oh, God.
bugs and like that kind of horrific. You'd be amazed like
Oh,
what can
like the
happen.
person with the unit next to mine is like a hoarder and whatever and is
If there
causing
are
me.
1,000 cockroaches next door, they're coming into your unit. Like,
I don't even want
they'll
to.
clean you up.
I don't know. I
They're
don't.
gonna crawl through that.
I can't say no more. I just
No more.
all I
I am
know is
bound by
crazy.
attorney-client
Crawl through your
privilege.
wall.
All I know is crazy things happen.
The cockroaches survive
Crazy
anything.
things happen in community associations.
They do. They do.
Listen, I can say no
When
more,
the
but
dinosaurs died, the roaches survived.
you see these really extreme nuisance cases with like
Of course.
hoarding and all that kind of things. That's like a condo cliche.
Have you ever seen that show? Have you seen the Hoarders
I have
show?
not.
Oh man,
It's probably one of the most unnerving things.
the TV show is out of control. And just the bugs, the bed bugs and the roaches and what are you gonna do? What can you do, right? You're trapped
Well,
in
one
this
of the
situation.
one of the things
Dealing with
associations.
neighbor that has this situation.
But one of the things I mean, just speaking generally, in a general sense, one of the foundational things in condo law is that condominium associations have a right of access in condominiums. So, like, if you're in a condominium association and you have a unit that is like causing a menace to other units and it needs an immediate repair or maintenance or something like urgently, the
Yeah.
governing documents and the statute are going to say that the association has a right to access that unit to do what's necessary. And from my perspective, it's like fix it first and ask who's paying for it second. Like not that you should lose sight of that, but sometimes people are, oh, they've got to pay for it or I'm not doing it but that's not a construct. Like
No.
it should just be done. It should be fixed, abate the nuisance. And then if you need to go after the owner who caused it, you do so.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Good advice. I was about to say closing words. It's been fun, but our time's up. So
We have so much more to talk about.
I know. I know.
Please, this is
Josh.
like therapy, so I don't want to change.
I'm so glad we've been good for your mental health, Jonathan. So any closing thoughts for our listening and viewing audience?
I have a closing thought.
Oh,
I
what-
feel like you need a landing page where people could just pay you $5,000 to like review condo shit before they buy it.
Leslie's trying
You
to start
know,
this
like
business.
100%. I could see a huge market for anyone that wants to buy into something like this. They have your realtor is, no offense to your realtor,
The problem with
not
a condo,
the fucking clown to
this will
ask.
probably be a cottage industry that arises.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is the cost, like the level of care that is involved, the level of duty you're assuming.
Yeah.
Can you be compensated enough for that?
Yeah.
And what are the risks? And how can
Interesting.
you really diagnose these issues? So you have to be very careful to
I see
disclaim,
what you
like
mean.
you can't like promise, you can't like
No,
so
no,
like
no, no.
what is the value of that, and what is the due diligence required, and what is the
That will be
Yeah, so it's
spelled
like-
out in your retainer.
so
We'll,
it's-
we'll talk.
but
We'll
it's
talk.
like a hard,
we'll figure that out,
We have a
Jonathan.
great contract attorney.
Don't you
We can
worry.
You two
Don't
been on
you
here talking
worry.
about
We're going to
this shit.
limit your liability, but believe me, you have a lot of value to provide to potential
it's definitely
homeowners.
an industry that is going to be a
Okay.
growing one.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so thank you for your closing thought, Jonathan. Do
Did
you have a closing
thoughts?
thought?
Because I always got thoughts, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my number one closing thought would be that the stakes have really never been higher for associations because of these financial burdens, because of the duties, because of these tragedies that have occurred and these crazy controversies. And so it's just more important than ever to, if you're a director, to do what you have to do with care and like consult with your professional team, legal counsel. Even if it costs a little extra to have that extra due diligence, it's worth it in the long run and it'll save money. And just anyone dealing in this association environment, just understand that it's more intense than ever. So
Yeah.
there's like a lot of intensity from buyers who need information, from owners who are afraid, directors who are dealing with crazy challenges. So like in that intense environment, it's important to remain civil, professional, and just to have perspective. So I guess that's my final.
Perspective.
That's my
That's
final, and empathy. And empathy.
Oh,
No,
perspective and empathy.
Seriously, you may, because everybody's dealing with a lot of challenges right now.
I'm laughing at you. It's terrible.
That is very
I thought
nice.
these were very
That's
nice.
a wholesome final
Do you
thought.
remember-
Hey, I'm a wholesome
What,
guy.
You
Jerry
are,
Springer?
you are.
Did you ever watch Jerry Springer?
Yeah, I remember
So
Jerry.
Jerry Springer used to have a whole hour where people would beat the crap out of each other, and then he'd end it with the same, like a closing thought. And his last line always was, take care of yourself and each other.
Oh,
That's right.
how fucking nice.
There you go.
Like people beating the shit out of each other for an hour on his show.
Perspective and
anyways.
empathy.
That's funny.
I like it. I love it. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming today and for joining us. This has been Law Shit You Should Know. Join us next time for some more.
Law shit
Thank you
should know.
guys so much for having me.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Take care.